So I'll have to get used to turning the mic on and off. Beekeepers Association. So certainly it's time for us to refresh our knowledge on these things. We appreciate Blaine stepping into the breach here, and we'll turn the time over to him. Thank you.
This is a presentation I give every January to my 4-H club down in Cedar City. So we'll see if we're as smart as my 4-H kids. And we're not. There we go. Yeah. We start out with the 4-H pledge. And then I have the kids give a report on their hive status. A little bit of lag here.
Can't hear you.
A little bit about the Utah Bee Inspection Act. It was adopted in 1892. That was before statehood, at the insistence of beekeepers of the state of Utah. You can find the act at this website here. The law requires licensing of all beekeepers in the state, and requires, I'm the county bee inspector for Iron and Washington counties. It requires me to inspect the bees in my county. And we're looking for diseases, parasites, and Africanization. And the state wants us inspectors to act as mentors for you. So anytime you have a question, call your county bee inspector. And if your county doesn't have one, then call the state bee inspector. The law requires movable frames so that they're easy to inspect, and that makes it easier to harvest too. So there's some benefits there of having movable frames. Each area must be identified by who you are, your license number or your phone number, something like that. If it's on your residential property, you don't need to do that. But off your residential property, your bee yard needs to be identified. We're required to extract our honey in a place that bees can't get into. And that's kind of related to open feeding. We don't want a chance where bees from miles around can come and share diseases and parasites. So we extract in the house or the garage, something like that. The state law requires each county to appoint at least one county bee inspector, and most of the counties don't have one. So if your county doesn't have one, get on your county commission, have them appoint one for you. Use the light here for some reason. We have 4 things that are causing problems for us. One is pathogens, of course, diseases. We have American foul brood, European foul brood, a whole bunch of viruses, and some fungus problems. And pesticides are a problem. Improperly applied pesticides. If the applicator follows the law, the pesticides aren't going to be a problem. But sometimes, well, most of the time, people don't follow the law, follow the label. And we beekeepers are putting pesticides in our hives too, so that we have to be careful with that. Poor nutrition. Most people have said they want to keep bees to save the bees. Really should just plant flowers, because they're not helping. They're not taking care of their bees. And parasites, the varroa mite is our biggest threat right now. And the interaction between those, The bees can tolerate a little bit of any one of these things, but altogether, the interactions make it deadly for the bees. Now, this map is centered on my house down in Cedar City. 1 mile rings. So you see that within 3 miles, I've got the entire city of Cedar City. In that, I have to consider that being my bee yard. And I know for a fact, because I'm the county inspector, there are American foulbrood cases in this area. So when you open feed or extract your honey out in the open, you've got bees from all that area. That's 28 square miles. The bees come into your bee yard, sharing their disease with yours. So sanitation is a huge part of beekeeping. You have a picture here of a dog with red mange. It's a tick-borne problem. You have a lot of beekeepers say, I want to keep bees. Would you put a leash on this dog and walk it through the streets and say, I'm proud to be a natural dog keeper? Well, that's what a lot of people are doing with their bees. They're not taking care of them. They're getting the mites, they're getting the diseases. We cannot keep bees naturally. When I've done scores of cutouts, cutting honeybee colonies out of houses and trees and so on. And I have, in the last 10 years, 20 years, I have never found a feral colony with old dark comb. They don't survive. Not in nature. They need to have conscientious beekeepers take care of it. There's no exotic strain of bee or hive design that will save your bees. They have to be taken care of. So we have a lot of tools. I'll talk about those. But we want to integrate all of these tools so that we have good protection for our bees. The honeybee colony is a superorganism. You've got a queen, you've got a few hundred drones, maybe a couple of thousand drones, and tens of thousands of workers. And none of them can live without by themselves. They need to be in a colony with the whole family. And the queen is going to make with hopefully dozens, a couple of dozen drones, and each drone is contributing a different set of genetics. And that broad spectrum of genetics of multiple matings helps make the colony more resistant to the threats that we have. And that's nature working for us. It's designed to be self-protecting, but we have threats, and if we don't address them, they'll be overwhelmed and we'll lose them. We've developed tools. We'll talk about those to help the bees to cope with their threats. And we have to be prepared to use them when necessary. I'm a hobby beekeeper. I have 10 hives in my yard. A lot of the commercial beekeepers consider us hobbyists to be a threat to them. They do what they can to protect the health of their bees, but they still get sick because we're not taking care of ours. So we have to be good stewards of our bees and take care of them. This shows average winter losses. You've got 3 categories there. The red is chemical free. That's the people that aren't doing anything. The blue is commercial, and then the green is using organic products. There's a few organic products we can use. A couple of acids, thymol. You can see that the people that keep their bees naturally, chemical-free, don't have very good winter survival. You want to take care of your bees if you want to have good survival. The typical hobby beekeeper loses 50% of the bees every year. And that's just not sustainable. We got to take care of our bees. Be careful about acquiring used equipment. When I was about 16, 17, I saw an ad in the paper, somebody selling a bunch of beehives. So I called him up, said, I'm going to go look at it. And I asked him, why are you selling? And he said, well, my bees are dying. The bees died. This is back in the 60s. And that's what you call a clue. My bees died. Well, I bought them. And at the time, I think I had two colonies. And I started doing splits and expanding my operation. And within a month, everything was rotten with American Falcon. I bought American Falcon from Big Guy. So be very careful about buying used equipment. If you're out inspecting your bees and you see a problem in this hive, don't take a frame out of this one to put over here. You're just going to transmit that disease. If I see a problem in this hive, I'm going to sterilize everything I've got to touch that hive before I touch another hive. And as the county bee inspector, I'm required to do that too. When I inspect your bees, I'm going to sterilize everything before I go to anybody else's yard, especially mine.
Are you putting your tools just in like a solution? What are you using to sterilize?
I use heat. You can put it in the smoker and puff it up, get it really hot. That's sufficient.
They just gloves.
And latex gloves, throw those away. Turn them inside out and dispose of them. When I get home, when I come to your yard, the state issues us some sanitizing wipes and bleach. I will sterilize everything before I leave your yard. And then when I get home, I sterilize everything again. And for the hive tool, I will, you got a gas stove in the kitchen. I'll put that hive tool on that and get it hot enough to melt the propolis and wax, wipe it off. I've got a clean brand new hive tool again. So that's how I deal with it. It's a good idea to replace your combs every 3 to 4 years. They can get old and dark. And some of the pesticides that are oil-based, they'll be absorbed by the wax. And so you want to replace it for that reason. And pathogens can build up too. And eventually reach a point where it's a threat to your bees. Store your extra equipment and your honey in a bee-proof enclosure so that the robbers can't get in there and steal honey residue and take home diseases or bring diseases to your equipment. Don't go to Smith's and buy honey to feed your bees. You don't know what kind of pathogens are in there. The bacteria won't grow in honey, but spores will remain viable in there for decades. So if you feed contaminated honey to your bees, you're inviting the problem. Do what you can do to prevent robbing. If you see signs of it, do something. This is we cannot create a feeding frenzy. That's part of the statute. You'll see people put their equipment after they've harvested their honey. They'll just set it out in the open for the bees to come clean it up. That's a great way to invite bees from that 3-mile area. They could go up to 5 miles. That's 100 square miles. Come to your frames and walk all over that, and now you've got problems. So we don't do this. When you're done harvesting, put that zipper right back on the hive. So those bees can clean up their own residue. All right, we'll go to the next slide here. So the same thing here. That's very bad practice. Don't do that. People think they're pretty clever, but they're not. There's a guy on, this is from a guy on YouTube. His name rhymes with Fat Bee Man. This is how he feeds his bees. Imagine bees within 28 square miles crawling over that with your bees. That's against the law for a very good reason. More open feeding, don't do that. The first disease we'll talk about is American foul brood. Under a microscope, that's what the bacteria looks like little sausages. These spores, as this goes through its life cycle, it creates spores that are viable for at least 40 years. I've seen some reports 80 years. It's extremely contagious. And this is the primary reason for the adoption of the Utah Bee Inspection Act. We had a really serious problem. And back in the 60s, we had a serious problem with it. We kind of have a control of it, but statewide, we still have several cases every year. So the threat is out there.
With that disease, is there ways to treat your hive to get rid of it so it doesn't kill your bees?
Well, the preventive sterilization, keeping everything clean is the big key, and avoiding open feeding.
So they've got it.
Once you've got it, you've got it. And I'll talk about that. On the left, you have some normal brood that just disregard the color. The one on the left is new comb, the one on the right is old comb. So the color is not an indication that you've got a problem. But on the right, you see perforated cell cappings. And the cell cappings look kind of greasy or oily. That's a sign that you've got American foul brood, and you call your bee inspector. You want the cell cappings to be kind of a matte finish on it. It only affects the young larvae. The larva doesn't live long enough to become an adult, and the adults don't catch this disease. It's only a larva that's a day or two old, eating some spores, and that makes it sick. And the spores will not germinate in an older larvae. It has to be a younger larvae. The spores germinate in the gut of the larva, and the vegetative form of the bacteria begins to grow, and using that larva as nourishment. And by the time it's gone through its cycle and the cell's capped over, that's when the larva starts showing signs of disease. And by the time this has gone through the whole process, that one larvae, that one cell has hundreds of millions of spores in it. And it smells bad. The adult bees, the housekeeping bees, will try and clean up the mess, and they spread those hundreds of millions of spores all over the hive. So it's extremely contagious. Very dangerous for us. They die after the cell is capped over. They should cover all that. And as the hive becomes weaker, you're not producing new adults. They're dying in the pupa stage. As it becomes weaker, it's no longer able to defend itself from robbers. And so you have bees from within 3 to 5 miles of your area coming to steal your honey and take that disease home. Very, very contagious. Every time we want to inspect our hives at least every 2 weeks. We're looking for disease and parasites, space. We want to make sure they have enough space for expansion for the queen to work. But every time we open that hive, we look for signs of American foul brood. And I have, last year, I caught a case in New Harmony, which was before you could actually smell it. I was able to catch it really early. And that beekeeper elected to destroy the hive, which is the best option. The state will, if we catch it early, the state will allow us to use antibiotics, but that's not ideal. The best option is just burn everything, and that's what she chose to do.
Was she a hobbyist?
Yes, just one hive.
Where did she pick it up? Any idea?
Within 3 to 5 miles per hectare, there's somebody that's got it. So it's out there. So we don't see signs of the disease until after it's capped over. It'd be kind of a coffee color. The gunk inside will be stringy. I'll show you a picture of that here in a minute. It stinks. After it's gone through several years of, several days, it'll dry out and you'll have a hard brittle scale on the bottom of the cell. You can't pry that out. It's in there forever. So that's the sign that you've got it. This shows the field test. We'll take a toothpick or a pine needle or something like that, stick it in there, stir it up, and pull it out. And it comes out ropey, kind of like snot, like the way I like to describe it. And when your bee inspector comes to check this, he or she will use a Q-tip and get samples of that gunk and send it into the state. You can do the same thing. You can send in samples to the state, but you have to pay for it. If the inspector does it, it's free. So have your inspector do this for you. Be very careful about buying used equipment. That's how I got my case years ago. Good sanitation practices, sterilize everything that's touched a hive that's contaminated. Cycle out your old frames so that these spores don't build up. And disease-resistant stock helps. One of the reasons we brought in Italians back in the 1800s was they're more disease-resistant than the old German black bee, but they're not disease-proof. They still need attention. We used to use prophylactic application of antibiotics. When I got started raising penicillin, the disease got resistant to penicillin. We switched to terramycin, and now we're switched over to tylosin. What we used to do is mix the antibiotic out of acetate sugar, spray it on the top bars of the hive. And do that early in the spring and then after the harvest so that the antibiotics don't get in the honey. And that would prevent that disease from developing and get to where it gets spread. It is not a legitimate cure because antibiotics will do nothing to those spores. It only affects the living vegetating stage. So it's not a cure, it's only a preventative. If your hive is diseased, like I said, the state, if you catch it early, the state will let us use antibiotics, but it's still there. It only masks the problem. It's not a cure. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the livestock industry, chickens, cattle, pigs, and bees, abuse these antibiotics. They're not withholding the antibiotics before harvest or butchering or whatever. And so the federal government took that away from us. We can no longer legally apply antibiotic prophylactically. Question?
A few years ago, we were talking about phages.
Yeah, I'm going to bring that up. A few years ago, there was a product came on the market. It was developed at BYU in the microbiology department called broodsafe. It's phages. It's a type of bacteria, and they selected some strains of this phage that is unique or specific to American foulbrood. And that was really, really promising. They got it approved by the FDA and EPA as a feed additive. And we had that for a couple of years. They wanted to change the certification to become a treatment. And the EPA made them take it off the market while they do the testing for that. And they ran out of money. So we've lost the phages unless somebody's got a few $1 million to help out Escom Labs. But that was really promising. I don't know if we're going to get it. There's a new vaccine that's come out. You might have seen that in the news. Dylan Labs is coming up with that, where they'll administer orally a vaccine to a queen. And her daughters and sons will be resistant to American foulbrood. That immunity or that resistance only lasts as long as that queen is in there. If once she's superseded or you replace her, your protection is gone. And that's one problem with counting on specific disease-resistant stock. You don't know how long that genetics is going to be in there. So we have to be conscientious about the diseases. This vaccine is promising. If everybody used it, it would be good. If everybody replaced their queens every couple of years with the vaccinated queens, that would be good, but you know that's not going to happen. So that disease threat is going to be out there forever. So again, antibiotics are never an appropriate treatment. It's only an appropriate preventative, and that's illegal now too. So the best treatment is fire. Now, I had a case 6 or 8 years ago, American foul burn in my yard. So somebody within 5 miles of me has American foul burn. It could be a feral colony, who knows what. And this is what I did. I had the grandkids over and we had marshmallows. That's the thing to do. The frames, the cones are not economically salvageable. Burn them. If you have old hide boxes, burn them. If you have fairly new equipment, good condition, you can sterilize it with a torch or soak it in a bleach solution. But you've got to do something to sterilize that equipment. Get rid of the frames, sterilize everything else.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Is it like, I'm really new to this, so I don't.
So it's only 60 years, I'm still learning.
But like, so when you burn the hive, do you burn your bees too, or can you transport your bees to a different hive?
The best answer to that is kill them, and burn them. But again, the state will allow us to shake those bees onto the ground in front of a hive with absolutely new equipment. By the time they've drawn out the comb from scratch, they'll have consumed it, digested most of the spores. And so that's possible. There's a study in Denmark a few years ago that said that's 95% effective. 5% risk is good enough for you to do that. That is an option, but the best thing is just destroy everything. And I found this problem on I think it's about Wednesday. I notified the state, and the next Saturday I'm having my 4-H beekeepers over, and I decided not to destroy that. I wanted the kids to see that, so I sent out a newsletter to everybody, an email, and one of the people on the list, father, is a veterinarian who happens to keep bees. And he got that email and he said, I got to see this. So he showed up with his kids. And I told everybody, do not touch this. Only me. Nobody touched this. Well, being the scientist and veterinarians are, he grabbed the frame and he's looking at it, smelling it. But it's good for the vet to have that experience. And I haven't had any problem with it since, even though I'm not using antibiotic prophylactic. The next disease we'll talk about is European foul brood. This is quite as bad because it doesn't produce spores. Once you knock the disease down, it's gone until they bring it in again from another disease. Again, it affects the larvae when they're young, and you'll see the signs of the disease while they're still in the larva stage. They'll be yellow, tan colored, and that's a sign you've got American foul brood or European foul brood. I see this a lot more often than I do American foul brood. See, in the last 15 years, I think I've been bee inspector. I've maybe found 4 cases of American foul brood, but I see half a dozen of these every year. It's European foul brood, so it's out there. Ignore the color, but on the left is what your larva should be like, pearly white, glistening. On the right, you see the dead and dying larva. So you'll see the yellowish tan color. You'll see this also, these signs when you have parasitic mite syndrome. We're all like. So call your bee inspector, he'll come take your sample, send it in, and they'll give you a really nice report about what they found. Sometimes you'll see the larva twisted, kind of like maybe they got a tummy ache and they're writhing in pain. I don't know what that is. They can be slightly, if you put a stick in there, toothpick or something, you get some slight ropiness like you would American foul brood, but not necessarily. Again, it'll smell, that's why it's called foul brood. It also produces a scale, but it's rubbery and you can pry it out with a toothpick. This seems to be, the bees seem to be more susceptible to this when they're under stress. If there's not a whole lot of nectar coming in, not a good supply of pollen. Maybe it's poor pollen, you know, all they're getting is pollen off the corn. That's not really good pollen for them. So when they're under stress, you'll see more of this European colored pesticide stress. We usually see this in the spring to a lesser extent in the fall when there's stress on the hive. Again, it can be spread rapidly, so do what you can to prevent robbing and open feeding, things like that. Don't move. If you see a potential problem, don't move that frame from here to here. And sterilize everything that touched that hive. Get rid of those latex gloves. So good sanitation practices, don't move the disease around, prevent robbing, control mites. That puts stress on the bees, makes them more susceptible. Sometimes if we requeen it, we get different genetics in there that helps them pop out of the problem. And the state will allow us to use terramycin or tylosin to treat this. And the federal government will too. But a prescription is required. You have to go to a veterinarian to get this the antibiotics. And the statute, the bee directive is what they're calling it, requires that the veterinarian have a personal relationship with the pet patient. So they really should come look at your bees and have the knowledge to recognize what it is. But in my experience, if you take the lab report you get from the state to the vet, it'll give you the prescription. And that's the appropriate treatment here because we're not producing spores. But it's not going to last forever. Chalk brood is another brood disease. This is a fungus. It's called chalk brood because it affects the brood and because the mummies look like little pieces of chalk. They could be white, tan, gray, different colors. Again, this is a stress-related problem. I usually see it in spring, early summer. If you get a damp spring, you're going to see more of this. If it's dry, you're not going to see so much. The adult bees will try and remove these mummies, and you'll see them on the landing board, on the ground in front of the landing board. And when you open up the hive, you'll see them in the cells. And you poke at it with a toothpick, you're going to find that it's hard. That's what it looks like. You have tan, gray, different colors. And again, you poke that it's hard like a piece of chalk. There's no approved chemical treatment for this. Prevention is best we do. Adequate ventilation helps a lot. I have the main entrance on the bottom and a small entrance up at the top. So there's ventilation over winter that helps. The moisture builds up is going to increase your probability of having this. If we have a concept called chilled brood. If you check your bees when it's cool, below maybe 50, 60 degrees, if you pull the frame out of brood and keep it out too long, it's going to chill the brood, they'll be more susceptible to get this problem. So if you have to check when it's cool, take a really quick look and stick it back where it's warm, so we don't chill the brood. We can strengthen a weak colony by moving a frame of brood and nurse bees over from another hive that's healthy. Again, replacing the queen to different genetics might help. And good sanitary practices are always good. You got the fungus in there, you don't want to be spreading that to another hive. Nosema is an adult problem. There are a couple of types. The one we used to have, see a lot, was Nosema apis for the European honeybee. We imported Nosema cerati from Asia. So we have the two different types. These are caused by spores that germinate in the gut of an adult bee. And it has a little structure that it penetrates the gut wall of the bee and starts feeding on the nutrition that the bee provides, and it replicates in the bee. The spores must be swallowed by an adult bee for the infection to be initiated. It's an oral fecal type disease. The feces have the Nosema spores, and the workers will try to clean that up, and as they're doing that, they're consuming the spores. And makes them sick. This just gets worse. The spores are very resistant to changes in temperature. Desiccation can survive outside the bee in the hive environment for extended periods of time. The females are most strongly affected, and it can also cause queen failure. The Nosema apis, the one we used to have, has been supplanted by Nosema cerati. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe the Nosema cerati affects the bee before they have a chance to get Nosema apis. It affects the cell lining of the gut, and it may also be a winter disease. It's only noticed in the spring when the bees are first inspected. You'll often see feces inside the hive and on the face of the hive outside. It's very damaging to colony bees that overwinter in the north, where they're longer winters, and so you see more of the north. And I guess we're kind of north too. So this is what you see, the feces on the frames, inside, outside the hive. Shortens the life of the bee, and so you got a mess there that kind of needs to be cleaned up. The bees can clean it up, but it's going to help make them sick. Diana Cox Foster is a scientist at the Bee Lab up in Logan. She found Nosema cerati in 100% of the hives she's tested. So you've got it, whether you see signs or not. Dysentery isn't associated with Nosema cerati. But what you'll see is the colony just doesn't seem to thrive. It doesn't progress. It's just kind of stagnant in health. You try and feed it. Sometimes it won't take the syrup. If you have an inside feeder, a frame replacement feeder, a lot of times you'll see mass drowning in those things because you're not strong enough to crawl back out. Prevention, weather all these strong colonies, plenty of honey in the proper position so they don't have to break up the cluster to move somewhere else to get food. Put them into winter with a young queen. I replace my queens every other year. So I replace half my queens every year. So I always want young queens in there. High quality protein helps a lot. There's an antibiotic. Now this is a fungus, classified as a fungus, but there's an antibiotic that seems to stop the reproduction of this stuff called fumagillin, brand name Fumagil B. This was off the market for several years. It's back now. Pretty expensive, but if you see signs of Nosema, you might want to get some of that and use it. What it does is as it does with bacteria, it inhibits the reproduction. I need to take that bullet out since it was no longer available. It is back on the market. Now, heat treatment can be used to kill the spores containing the equipment. The melting temperature of wax is 140, 145 degrees. So if you heat it up to 120, it's not going to damage your combs, but it'll sterilize them.
Does that kind of heat kill the bees as well?
Well, yeah, it would, yeah. You sterilize the equipment, and the bees would have to go back onto sterile equipment. Again, psychological frame, so you don't get these spores build up in the hive. Our biggest threat is the varroa mite. We imported this thing into the United States in I think 1986, 87. We found it here in Utah a year later. Its natural host is Apis cerana, European honeybee, a little bit smaller than our European honeybee. Somebody brought in some bees hidden in their suitcase that had these 5 bites, and now we've got it. Australia managed to get out of getting this disease until just recently. Now they've got it. There's always somebody out there that thinks it needs to violate the laws regarding importation of living things. It's small, but it's you can see with the naked eye, unless you're old 74-year-old eyes like mine. I can see them. They're about a little bit smaller than the size of a head. They're kind of a russet brown color. I should have brought a model. I have a model that big of this thing is proportionally sized to a human. If you had a parasite on your skin of the same proportional size, it'd be something like the size of your hand stuck to you, sucking your butt. So you can imagine how devastating that is for a bee. And about a picture there, you see one on the thorax of a worker there. So this arrived here in 1987, Utah, 1989. It can only replicate in the honeybee colony. There's no other host that will support this critter. It weakens the bee by sucking the hemolymph out of the bee, and more importantly, and more commonly, the fat body. The fat body is an organ in the belly of the abdomen, where we're finding that most of these varroa mites are attached to the belly of the bee. It spreads RNA viruses, including the hornweed virus, a couple of dozen different viruses. So that's, you get the combination of parasitization plus the diseases that affect vectors. It shortens the life of the bee by about a third. So you have a bee born in the spring and the summer. We want that bee, if you expect that bee to live 5 or 6 weeks, but you knock a third off, that's the part of the life that it's supposed to be out foraging. And so you don't have foragers. There's a caste of bees called the grocer bees that their job is to meet the foragers at the entrance of the hive, transfer the load, and the grocer goes and stores it in the cell. That's a process called trophallaxis, where they're spreading, transferring this load of nectar. But the recipient is also receiving some pheromones and hormones from that older bee. And when the grocer bees are no longer receiving that trophallaxis, or pheromones and hormones, it turns on their urge to go forage, but they're not mature enough to come back home. So they go out and try, but they die in the field. And so the population of the colony collapses pretty quickly. The bees that are born in the late summer and fall, we want those bees to live 5 to 6 months. They've got to get all the way through the winter and see May flowers. But you knock a third off, they're dead right now. February, March. Sometimes they're dead in October. So it's our leading cause of colony mortality right now. Severe impact on the beekeeping industry. The commercial beekeepers can tell you that they're losing a third of the bees every year. And we hobby beekeepers, we're losing half. So it's a big impact. But we have tools that we can use to fix the problem. Next slide. There we go. This shows the process of development. You have the queen lay an egg. 3 to 4 days later, it hatches into a larva. The nurse bees start feeding it, and just before it's capped over, the founder's fly will crawl in and hide underneath that larva. When it's capped over, she'll come out and start feeding on that pre-pupa and pupa and start laying eggs. The first one is going to be a male. The subsequents will be females, and they will. The females will mate with their brother, and after a total of 21 days, that weak worker comes out with maybe 5 or 6 mites with her. So it replicates pretty fast. They'll remount on the bodies of the adults for a few days, and then the process starts over. The male dies in the cell, he doesn't come out. Only the females come out. And I think I covered that. During the lifetime of the founder's mite, the mother will go through approximately 3 reproductive cycles, each time producing 4, 5, 6 daughters. So you can see it multiplies really fast. About 2/3 of the mites in your hive are in cap cells. You're not going to see them. You do an alcohol wash or powdered sugar roll to count mites. You're not counting 3/4 of your mites. They're in the cap group. So if you want to know how many you have, multiply what you count by maybe 4. This shows the anatomy of the bee. I haven't been able to find a map of the bee that shows the fat body, but it's right here in the belly, and that's where we're finding most of the mites attached to the bee. In the past, we thought they were sucking hemolymph because you'd see them on the back of the bee. And the only thing nutrition they find there would be hemolymph. But most of them are on the belly, so they're after the fat body. The fat body is fat reserves, but it's also performs the functions of our kidneys, liver. That's a major part of their immune system, and that's what that mite is attacking, injecting viruses into that part of the bee. This is a chart came out of research a few years ago showing where they're finding most of the mites on the belly. What they do is they crawl up. You got 7 segments in the abdomen. They're crawling in between those plates and piercing the membrane that separates them. And so even if you turn the bee over, you're only going to see part of the mite. Most of it's concealed inside those plates. Spreads dozens of viruses. One of the worst is the deformed wing virus. The combination of parasitation and virus shorts life by, like I said, a third, 25, 5%. It affects the learning ability of the bee, so she can't navigate and so on. This is our leading cause of colony mortality. We have to manage this way. I had a woman call me from Hurricane the other day saying one of her colonies was dead, and I went and checked it. I scooped up a half a cup of the dead bees on the landing board, put them in an alcohol wash. You got 29 mites. And that's fatal. You get that high of a mite count, you're probably not going to be able to save the colony. You can't let it get out of control like that. Several different viruses. You got the farm wheat virus up there. That bee is never going to fly. She won't live long enough anyway. The bottom one there is chronic bee paralysis. So you can see the signs of some of these. There's a couple of dozen of these problems. Hopefully you never see the disease because you're counting the lights. Covered that. The upper left frame is what we want the brood to look like. You see a few empty cells there. That could be where the queen skipped the cell. It could be where the older bees detected a problem and removed that larva or egg or pupa. The one in the lower right corner there brood that the older bees are trying to clean up, and you never want to see it get this bad. And if you count your mice, I'll show you how to do that here in a minute. And if we take care of the mice, you never see things like that. If you do, call your bee inspector. Have them take a look at it for you. European foulbrood can sometimes look like that. Here you see you've got a varroa mite on the larva. B, was detected in the pupa cap. B started to cannibalize the head or eventually remove the pupa. C, you got two mites on the larva. So these are signs that you'll see. In the Apis cerana, this mite only parasitizes drones. The Apis cerana comes out of the cell because it's a smaller bee, comes out of the cell earlier, and so the mite doesn't replicate in the worker cells of the Apis cerana. But our bees are larger, European bees are larger, in the cell longer, and there's enough time for the mite to replicate in a worker cell. But they still seem to prefer the drone brood. But you'll see them like a worker brood too. One cell could have, one drone cell could have as many mites as 10 to 20 worker cells. That's what they prefer. That's going to make the drone worker weaker. It's going to make fewer mating flights. And when he mates with a queen, he's going to transmit the disease to her. Or probably not transfer a mite, but at least transfer diseases. So we have to keep these mite counts down. And when I was a teenager, I could count on my queens lasting 5-6 years. And now I replace them every other year because they're just not lasting very long anymore. And that's because of these diseases that we have. This shows the lighter the color of the yellow one is the amount of brood, bee brood that you have in the hive. The queen peaks out her egg laying about the summer solstice, and then the brood starts to decline. The adult population of the orange line there is going to lag that by 21 days. So that's going to peak maybe August. The varroa mites, you start out with a low count in January, and that's going to lag a little bit. And that peaks out maybe September, October. And you see there towards the last half of the year, you've got way too many mites. So our goal is to keep that brown line down flat at 2% or less. Some people say 3%. I prefer to keep my mite count below 2%. If you do that, you won't have any losses. I don't know what it is for this year, but last year I had 100% winter survival. And that's because I keep that mite count down at 2% or less. The highest mite count I got last summer was 3%. So that's our goal. And if you do that, you're going to have good success. You let this happen, you're going to lose it. Again, samples of parasitic mite syndrome. When you look at the hives after it's dead out, you'll see this chewed up comb here in the corner. What that is it's robber bees coming in to steal what honey's in the hive. And of course, they're picking up mites and taking them home. So this problem spreads. There's a concept we call mite bombs. Whereas this colony collapses, it's got honey. Bees come in, rob the honey, and take that home. And there are beekeepers in your neighborhood, they're doing that. They're letting them die. And your bees are catching those mites. And on the bottom board, you'll see debris from all of that chewed up cell cappings. And if you poke around in there a little bit, you'll find a bunch of dead mites too. Checked the did out last spring, and she had 36 mice per half cup of bees. It just will not recover from that. So several ways we can count mites. One is to have a screen bottom board and slide this sticky board underneath that screen. If you coat it with a little bit of solid oil, the mites will fall through the screen. The bees can't touch it, so they're not going to get in that solid oil. But the mites will follow through that screen onto the landing board. And the rule of thumb I like, if this way you're going to count mites, is leave that board in 24 hours, pull it out. And if you have more than 50 mites in 24 hours, you got to do something. You got too many mites. And these mites are naturally falling off the bee. As they grow and move around the hive, they're going to knock a few mites off. A few, not enough to be effective. Some research has been done on screen bottom boards. It is not an effective treatment. All it is a way to count mites. You can detect it by the naked eye, but if you see one mite, it's out of control. So don't count on the naked eye. A great place to check for mites is drone brood. If your hive's getting crowded, you've got a 3/8 gap between this frame and the frame below. If they're getting crowded, they'll build drone brood in there. And as you pull up a frame, you'll break open that brood, look at that drone brood. And if you see any mites in there, you got to do something. If you have quite a bit of drone comb, you can use a capping tool, what we use when we harvest, and just scoop that underneath the heads of the drone brood and just pull them out and count mites. If more than 10% of your pupae have mites, you've got to do something. They're way out of control. When I come check bees as a county inspector, this is the process I use. I use the sugar shake. You want to do this at least monthly. We're checking the bees every other week, and we check for mites every week. Get a mason jar, some number 8 hardware cloth that's 8 wires per inch. It's small enough to keep the bees in the bottle, but large enough for the mites to fall through. Half a cup of bees, that's about 300. And screw the lid on. 1 or 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar. Shake and roll it, get all the bees good and covered, and shake it a little bit. And let it sit a few minutes. Then shake it out like a salt shaker onto a light colored surface. And this is what I use. I have a tub just like that. Shake that powdered sugar out and mites, and then I spray that with some water. That dissolves the sugar, and then I can count the mites on that white surface, white or yellow, light colored surface. And they just stand out on a light colored surface. If you get more than 6, some people say 9, you've got to do something. You can't let it get above that. I guess this video is not going to play by itself. Well, what that video was going to show is how to do an alcohol wash. You see, you got two bottles there, peanut butter jars. You got a hole that big around, cut in both lids, and then glue them with a piece of number 8 hardware cloth in between those 2 lids. You put your half cup of bees in the bottle and some alcohol, soapy water, windshield washer fluid, something to kill the bees and the mites. Shake it up really good and then swirl it and turn it upside down, and the mites will drain through. And by the collection this guy got, what, 60, 70 mites there? There's no way you're going to save that high. It's just too bad. If you get more than 6 to 9, you've got to do something. Don't let it give you a bad. I like to say that winter preparation begins in March by keeping that mite count below 2% all season long. All season long. The critical last ditch time to treat is August, mid-August. I harvest in August. The big reason is down in Cedar City we have a lot of rabbit brush, and I don't care for rabbit brush honey. So I harvest before that blooms, and as soon as I'm done harvesting, I check again. I make sure that my mite count is low. If you don't do anything, that's where your mite count's going to peak. Yeah. I see on Facebook all the time that people say, my bees died, I treated in October. Well, what are your mite counts all season long? I don't do that, I just treat in October. Well, you got what you get. So keep that mite count low all season long. So if you're not keeping your mites under control, or your neighbor isn't keeping their mites under control, that's affecting every beekeeper within 3 to 5 miles. Not very neighborly. The Bee Informed Partnership does a survey every year of beekeepers. You can opt into that. 60% of beekeepers responded in 2014 did not treat for mites. Beekeepers who did not treat for mites suffered as much as double the loss as those who treated. Backyard beekeepers suffered double the rate of losses of commercial beekeepers. Migratory beekeepers, we have some here in this room. They're putting their bees under a lot of stress, moving them from here to California and back. And when they take to California, they're putting in a great big petri dish full of these diseases. You get 1 million beehives coming from all over the country to that little corner of the world. And so it's a great place to share diseases and parasites and so on. But even though they're putting their bees under that kind of stress, they have better success than we hobby beekeepers do, because their livelihood is in that box and they take care of it. We need to do the same thing. So we have different kinds of treatments. We've got chemical treatments. Cobalt not used much anymore. Fluvalinate, Aquastan strips, you still see some of that. Those are both pyrethroid pesticides. They're approved, but the product can build up in the wax. And if you have a bad case, you want to use one of those. But hopefully some of the milder treatments will get the job done for you. Amitraz is pretty popular. Amitraz is one of the products we use when it's hot in the summer. With those three, you cannot use those when you have harvestable honey on the hive, because we don't want that to get into the human food system. A couple of thymol products, Apple Life Bar and Apogard. Well, back up to that top picture there shows you what the strips look like for Amitraz. You put strips where the brood are. The bee walker over that and track that product around and kills the mites. The middle picture has, if you look real carefully, you see 4 black squares on there. That's the Apple Life Bar. Comes in a cookie about 6 inches long, 1.5 wide. You break it up in 4 pieces and put that on the top bars in the brood area. And that works really well. You have to repeat this, follow the label. I think you repeat it every week or something like that for 4 treatments, because most of your mites are the calf brood, and this isn't going to affect the mites in the calf brood. So you got to reapply to get every stage of the brood. And then Apple Guard, it comes a little foil tin, you pull the lid off, it has a gel in it, you set that on the top bars, and the bees track that around. And it's both these products are also fumigating the hive. The fumes are affected too. Thymol products are not recommended when it's hot, so use those in the spring and the fall. They outgas too much to be safe for the bees in the hot summer. I inspected a hive last summer. They called me up, said their bees are dead. And I went and checked, said, well, I treated with Thymol. Went to the health food store and got a bottle of Thymol. We want to use a product that has been tested and approved. Don't make up your own stuff. Spend the money, get the right product. That way you know what the dose is, what's too much, what's not enough. Then we have formic acid products, Lineaway Quick Strips and Formic Pro. Those work really well. They have a temperature limit, so I use those in the spring or the fall. The neat thing about formic acid is it'll penetrate the cell cavities and kill mites that are in the cells. So it's kind of a neat product. Hop Guard is another commercial product, uses acids that are found in hops that you flavor beer with. And they've got, I've tried Hop Guard 2, it didn't work for me. I haven't tried Hop Guard 3, it might work better. That's a product you can use in the middle of the summer. It's kind of messy though. You get, I don't know what you'd call it, slime all over those strips, all over your hands, but you wear gloves. The oxalic acid is another product that's approved. You can apply that using fumigation. You slide a little heated tool with a dose of oxalic acid crystals on there. You hook up the electricity and then fumigates the hive. And that works pretty good. You can also use it in oxalic acid dribble. Mix it with sugar water, syrup, and dribble that on the bees. Oxalic acid, again, has to be repeated. One beekeeper said, well, I treated with oxalic acid, my bees are dead. Stuff's no good. How many times you do it? Once. No, you got to repeat it several times because this isn't going to attack the mites that are in the cap cells. You want to use The bottom picture there, that'd be the light the regional label.
No.
You put 2 pads on 2 strips on there at once, and you're done. After
You were looking for her because you saw her dog.
you can all the label says you can put 1 on at a time, and repeat after a couple of weeks. And that's the way I usually use it, is 1 at a time. But both of them work really well for me. Again, we only want to use registered proven products. Don't make up your own stuff or whatever you see on the internet. Randy Oliver, I'm sure you've all heard of him. He's working on using shop towels and sponges with oxalic acid and glycerin. And every time he talks to us, says this is not approved. And that's a clue. Don't use it. And I've done inspections on hives in Iron County. That's what they're using. They got this Randy Oliver, and yet I might count. Don't count on stuff you see on the internet. It's a good idea to rotate treatments. One time you'll use one of the formic acid products, and then the next time you treat, use a thiamol product, and that way you're not raising mites that are resistant to the problem you're trying to fight. And follow the label exactly. When I'm cooking something, the way I know how much salt to put in the dish is just dump it till my wife yells stop. Then I double that amount. Don't do that with this stuff. Follow the label. Some non-chemical treatments. Resistant hygienic stock, you can see VSH and Purdue ankle biters, and several different strains of bees that are helpful. But again, there is no strain of bee that is immune. They just have some resistance. So you can't count on resistant hygienic stock, but it's a part of what we want to do, integrate all these different tools together. We can interrupt the brood cycle by caging the queen. If you don't have open brood, you have no place for the mites to go to reproduce. And so you cage the queen for 2-3 weeks, no new brood, the mice die out, but you're not getting new brood either. So it's helpful, but it's not. It's a handicap, but it's a tool. We can interrupt brood cycles by doing splits. You put half the resources in 2 different boxes. You got the queen over here, no queen over here. This colony is going to have a brood break while they're raising a new queen. If they're successful raising a new queen. So it works on controlling mites, but it also controls your bees. Drone comb can be helpful. Like I said, the mites prefer the drone brood. So if you have a drone frame in there, the queen leaves that full of drone brood. As soon as it's capped over, take it out and put it in the fridge. A couple of days, you're filling all the mites in there and the brood. The other drones with the egg. And then you put it back in the hive and start over. So that helps limit the amount of brood that you have in there, but you still have the queen laying worker eggs, and you still have mice reproducing the worker brood. So it doesn't get all of them. Again, the screen or open bottom, that helps very slightly. It's as best used as a way of counting mites. Powdered sugar dusting, we use powdered sugar to count the mites, but what we're doing with that test is we're shaking it, agitating it, knocking the mites off. Well, some people say, well, if powdered sugar knocks them off, I'll just sprinkle them on the brood or on the hot frames. And but you're not agitating them. You're not knocking the mites off. Most of them are still staying on the bee. And if that powdered sugar gets into open brood, it'll desiccate the brood and kill it. So that's not an ideal. solution. Then some people say, well, I'll use small cell foundation because the Apis cerata is a smaller bee. So I'll force my European bees to be smaller. Well, that doesn't really work either. But if you integrate all this stuff together and be willing to use some of the products that are approved, you'll have good success with bees, with the mites. Tell me when you're heading up, right?
When you're done, you're done.
Okay. So you have a question out here? Yes, sir. Absolutely, yeah. You put a treatment in there and say it's one of the formic acid products. Check again in a week or two and make sure that it works. It doesn't always work. If you got a mite count of 4% and you treat, you better check again in a couple of weeks to make sure it's not still at 4% or 12% or 20%. You got to make sure it works. And just because you treat in May doesn't mean you don't have to do those monthly checks. You've got to keep doing those checks all season long. Another mite that we have had in the past, but we don't see it much anymore, the tracheal mite. This lives in the trachea, the breathing tubes of the mite, or the bee. We don't see this much anymore since we got the Apis or the varroa mite. As we're treating the varroa mites, it knocks these down too. So I wouldn't worry about the tracheal mites. But if your bees are struggling, it'd be a good idea to do a test. And you can see these things under a microscope. What are you doing, Dave? You hit the pause button over there. While he's working on it, I'll tell you a little war story. I got started out with one hive in a 4-H beekeeping club up Watts Upper County. And our advisor happened to be the county bee inspector at the time. And my friend and I learned about this club, and we're part of the original founding youth in the club. And my mother said, if you're going to keep bees, they're going to be on the roof. So that's where my first hive was, up on the roof. And I'm toting all the equipment up and bringing down 60-pound boxes of honey. And you're kind of stupid when you're 12, 14 years old. By the time I got to college, I had 40 colonies. Went on a mission. The dad said, I'll watch you bees while you're gone. And when I got back, I still had 40. This is before the mites. And I'd been home maybe a year, and I met this pretty girl in church and asked her, would you like to help me harvest honey? Oh, I would love to help you harvest honey. She had no idea what she'd get into. So I picked her up, and we went around and pulled honey off of 40 hives. And 40 hives was enough that I had enough revenue from that I didn't have any student loans. That plus a part-time job. We're done maybe 9, 10 o'clock at night by the time we harvested everything. And she was all sweaty and dirty and covered with honey and felt like the ugliest person in the world. And this guy's never going to want to see me again. But I'm thinking, this lady would do this for me. She's a keeper. 50 years next month. Another problem we have is the wax moth. I see on Facebook all the time people say the wax moth and the yellow jackets killed my bees. No, they don't kill your bees. The beekeeper kills the bees by not controlling the mites and diseases. The wax moth and the yellow jackets exploit winged and dead colonies. That's where they come in. Some things we can do about that is keep strong colonies. If you have strong colonies, you're not going to see wax moth. If you have stuff, extra supers that you need to store, they have drawn comb, store them so they're exposed to light. You won't have wax moth, they like the dark. If you put your equipment in the fall in a garbage bag and freeze them for a couple of hours, a couple of days, keep that bag sealed, they'll store all season, all winter long, so you're ready to use them again the next year. We can also use paramoth. It's the brand name paradichlorobenzene. It's similar to moth crystals we use for other moths. No, you don't want to use the other moths because that leaves dangerous residue. The paramoth doesn't leave dangerous residue in our equipment. And what I like, I've been using the last several years, is a biological treatment. It's a bacteria, Bacillus thuringiensis, brand name Certan, C-E-R-T-A-N. You mix that with a little bit of water and spray it on your equipment before you put it in storage. And I haven't seen any wax moth since I started doing it.
Are you spraying on the base of every single?
Every grade, both sides, every cell.
The ones you don't want wax moth.
Yeah, the ones that don't want wax, webs and feces and all of that nonsense. Bees, mice, moths do to us. So it's an easily controllable problem. And once the wax moth has been in your equipment, you just kind of clean it up, scrape all the wetting off, and put it back on the hive next year, and the bees will work with it. And it's cleaning it up. Any technology wonderful? Yes, sir. I can't quite hear you. Certan, C-E-R-T-A-N. Yeah, it's a powder in a foil package. It's mixed a little bit with water, spray it on. Yeah, right on the comb. And what happens is the wax moth larvae will start munching away on your comb and get some of that in her gut and it kills her. Kills the so you still see a little bit of sign of wax moth damage, but just maybe a couple of cells and she dies. Wonderful thing. No, this equipment I'm putting in storage. If your bees are strong, you're not going to have it in the hive. But the stuff you're storing over winter, that's where you apply this treatment. And you have any questions, Red? Okay. Another problem we don't see here yet, it's been seen a few times. Our commercial beekeepers inevitably bring some of these back, small hive beetle. And you see the beetles in the size of the bee, that's maybe a quarter of the size of the bee. It's pretty small, black. These are imported from Africa. The commercial beekeepers are bringing a few of these back, but they don't seem to be able to winter over here. And we don't have the right soil for them to pupate in. So I wouldn't worry about small hive beetle, but if you see one, start paying attention. You might be raising a strain that lives in the desert. So if you see one, call your bee inspector, but I wouldn't worry about it for now. That's the larva. They'll crawl around eating and defecating on the frames, and it causes the honey to ferment and spoil. And you'll start seeing all this sludge running out of the entrance of the hive. And this is probably the only reason why you never have bees that get abscond, is you've got small hive beetles so bad that the bees just say this is too disgusting and I leave. Most of the bee absconsions that you hear about in Utah are mite kills. The bees didn't abscond. Keep your bees strong, and that helps control this. But again, I'm not worried about it here in Utah yet. It shows the life cycle of the beetle. The adult beetle will fly in the hive, lay eggs, the eggs hatch, and you have the larvae go around, chewing up your comb, and they crawl out into the soil and pupate in the soil, come out as adults, and then find another hive to live into. But we don't seem to have the right soil around here, and our freezing temperatures over winter seems to control. You see a lot of this, and I've seen them. I've visited years in the south, and I've never seen them in the north. We have a couple of treatments for it. We put in the soil, it kills them in the soil. And there are traps that you put in the hive to catch them. Yellow jacket, tortoise, wasp. These critters are carnivorous. They eat meat. Our bees get pollen, protein from pollen. These insects get protein from eating other insects. You won't have a problem with them as long as your colonies are strong. You might see a wasp now and then, but they're not going to affect you. But you've probably seen in the news the lower right-hand corner, the Asian giant hornet. That's as big as my little finger. It's a huge insect, and they've been seen in parts of British Columbia and Washington. Again, the scientists say we don't have the right climate here for them, so we're probably not going to see it, but you never know. Evolution's out there. Any questions? Oh, my question. We have one more test. What do you think it is?
High schoolers, neighbors.
Neighbors.
Yeah.
Another slide in there. This farmer out here gave his orchard what it was. But again, if we
showing that.
here we go. This is you've heard about the neonicotinoids.
Yeah.
People are saying that's killing the bees. Well, you look at this map, it shows where they're bees.
From Asia.
And you see in Utah we're using very, very little of that. You look at Indiana, they're using a lot of it. Our colony mortality is the same in Utah as it is in Indiana. This is not the problem. The problem is the beekeeper won't take care of his bees. So don't blame it on pesticides. If they're applied by the labels, they're not a threat to you.
Mute myself. Click mute.
So in summary, we want to rotate products because some of them won't last forever. Amitraz is a great product, but it's starting to lose effectiveness. We're developing mites that are resistant to it. We lost Kumafos. It doesn't work very well anymore. We're losing Amitraz. So rotate your treatments. Don't use the same thing all the time. Integrate several things into your practices. The sanitation especially. Try different things and combine, they'll work. Stay informed, read a good book every year. Winter time's a great time for that. Subscribe to one of the magazines. I like American Bee Journal, Bee Culture is great too. I subscribe to both of them. And I read those articles, I learn stuff every month. Join and attend the Beekeepers Club. You're going to have experienced beekeepers there that'll help the beginners. And study your bees, learn from them. They'll teach you a lot. We need to learn between science fads and obsolete techniques. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's going to work. So we have to rely on science. That's what's going to save our bees. Fads and myths, there are a lot of those out there. I've talked about some really bad things here, but I'm optimistic, and I think you can be too. If you stay informed, follow the science, you can have good success. And I've heard that to myself. Good food sanitary practices around your bees. You want to spread diseases around. And most of all, have fun with your beekeeping. Get the studies as part of the game. Enjoy it. Any questions? Thank you for your attention.
I really appreciate Blaine literally leaping into the breach on a moment's notice like that. Can I have one more round of applause for Blaine on that? His experience and expertise is always worth listening to, and we're grateful to have him around. Our next scheduled presentation will be the Department of Agriculture at 11:30. Is that right? Did I get that right? I read it and then I forgot.
Organization report of 11.
Yeah, there is no organization report. No, none of the organization got back to me, so we got a little extra free time. We did some focus groups over the summer about what some beekeepers like to see, and some people said they wanted more socializing time. So this is our effort to give you more socializing time. The Department of Agriculture will present at 11:30. We'll keep to that schedule so that our online participants know what we're doing here. We're going to turn a little bit of time over to Richard and to Blaine to present a couple of prizes. So get your ticket out, know your number. If you haven't got a ticket, this is your chance to raise your hand and get one. So we've been trying to resolve our difficulty with connecting Mike. The problem is not on our end, and I'm not enormously optimistic that we're going to resolve it, but we will continue to try. If we're unable to connect him today, we're going to move our panel discussion from tomorrow up to this afternoon. So we'll discuss any questions, any current issues, anything we want to talk about together. We'll take that time this afternoon if we're unable to fill that spot. So Richard, are you ready?